I used to think loyalty was simple. You stick by your friends, no matter what, especially the ones who've been there for you through everything, heartbreak, hangovers, and late-night breakdowns. But now I lie awake at night with a pit in my stomach, wondering if I'm the worst kind of person for falling in love with someone I was never supposed to. It started in the most unexpected way. My best friend Jake had just gone through a messy breakup with his long-term boyfriend, Alex. They'd been together for 3 years, practically married in our friend group's eyes, and when it ended, it felt like everyone had to pick a side. Of course, I picked Jake's. He was my brother in every way but blood. We'd known each other since sophomore year of college. He was there when my dad died, when I came out to my family, and even when I lost my first real relationship. Jake was the one who always had my back. So when he called me that night, voice hoarse and broken, saying only, "It's over. I'm coming over," I didn't ask questions. I just unlocked the door and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Jake crashed on my couch for a week after that. He barely spoke at first. Just sat there scrolling through old photos, deleting some, angrily saving others, then drinking until he passed out. I didn't judge him. I'd done the same before. But something was off. He wasn't just sad. He was bitter, resentful, and every now and then he'd say something like, "He'll regret this," or "Watch him try to crawl back when no one else wants him." At first, I thought it was just heartbreak talking. But then I started to see things a little differently. Because a week after Jake left my apartment to stay with his sister, I ran into Alex at the grocery store, of all places. I was grabbing some almond milk and frozen pizza, and there he was, aisle 4, holding a bunch of bananas and looking completely lost. He froze when he saw me, and I felt this weird jolt in my chest, like I'd been punched and hugged at the same time. "Hey," he said cautiously, almost like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to speak to me. "Hey," I said back. "You look alive. That's a good sign, right?" He laughed quietly, and just like that, the ice cracked. We didn't talk for long, maybe 5 minutes, just enough to ask how he was holding up, and for him to tell me he was finally sleeping again, kind of. I told him Jake was still healing too, that they both needed time. Alex nodded and started to walk away, but then he paused and looked back at me. "Thanks for not hating me," he said. I wanted to say something neutral, but instead, the words came out before I could stop them. I never did. It should have ended there. But 2 days later, I got a message on Instagram from Alex. "Hey, I know this is weird, but do you have a minute to talk? I just need someone who understands." And that's how the secret conversation started. At first, it was innocent. A few DMs, then longer texts, then late-night chats when we both couldn't sleep. I kept telling myself I was just being supportive. I was helping someone process their pain. It wasn't like we were flirting. Not really. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Because every time I saw his name light up on my phone, my heart did something it wasn't supposed to. Every time he laughed at one of my dumb jokes, I felt like I was doing something wrong. And yet, I didn't stop. One night, I told myself I was going to end it. Just say, "Hey, this isn't right. You should talk to someone else." But when I answered his call, I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard before. He was crying. "I feel like everyone hates me," he whispered. "Like I'm the villain in some story I don't even understand." I tried to make it work with Jake. I really did. But he just stopped seeing me, stopped hearing me. And now all I'm left with is guilt. I sat in silence for a few seconds, unsure what to say. Then I said the most dangerous thing I could have. "You're not the villain, Alex. You're human." After that night, I started deleting our conversations. Not because we said anything wrong. Not exactly. But because I knew how it would look if Jake ever saw them. I hated the sneaking around, the hiding, the pretending. But I couldn't bring myself to stop. Because somewhere between those late-night talks and emotional check-ins, I had started to see Alex in a new way. Not as Jake's ex. Not as off-limits. But as someone who made me feel seen. I started noticing little things. The way his voice got softer when he talked about his childhood. The way he apologized when he over-explained things, like he wasn't used to being listened to. The way he remembered random details about me, like my favorite chips or how I hum when I'm anxious. It wasn't just attraction. It was something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. Until the night everything came crashing down. We had made a plan to meet, just for coffee, just to talk in person, one time. I told myself it would bring closure. For him, for me, maybe even for Jake. It was in a quiet part of town, at a cafe neither of us usually went to. I got there early, sat at a back table, and waited. My leg bounced under the table, my heart thumping in a way I couldn't control. When Alex walked in, I swear everything slowed down. He looked nervous, sure, but there was something else in his eyes. Relief, maybe, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and was finally exhaling. We didn't hug, didn't touch, just sat across from each other and talked. And God, it felt easy, like we were already part of each other's rhythm. No awkward pauses, no fake laughs, just raw honesty. He told me how lost he felt after the breakup, how everyone around him had opinions, but no one asked how he felt. I told him how guilty I felt just being there with him, even though I couldn't make myself leave. Then it happened. As we stood to leave, he looked at me, his expression unreadable. And then, without a word, he leaned in, not for a kiss, just a touch, his forehead gently resting against mine. And in that moment, I felt every line blur, every boundary collapse. But before I could process it, I heard a voice behind me, a voice I knew too well. What the F asterisk CK is this? I froze. Jake, standing 10 feet away, eyes wide, jaw clenched, betrayal radiating off of him like heat. I opened my mouth to explain, but nothing came out, because no excuse would be enough. No words could undo what he'd just seen. And in that single moment, everything changed. Jake didn't say another word. He just stood there, frozen for a second longer, his eyes darting between me and Alex. Then he turned around and walked straight out the cafe door. No yelling, no confrontation, just silence. And that was somehow worse than anything I had prepared myself for. I rushed out after him. Jake, wait. I called out, nearly tripping over a chair on the patio. He didn't stop. He moved fast down the sidewalk, hands clenched into fists at his sides, that sharp, stormy tension in his shoulders I hadn't seen since his dad's funeral. He looked like he was about to implode. I caught up with him just as he was unlocking his car door. Jake, it's not what you think. That made him stop. He turned to me slowly, almost too calm. Then what is it, Evan? I didn't know what to say. I couldn't lie. I couldn't pretend he hadn't just seen what he saw. The look between me and Alex, the closeness, the unspoken energy. But I also couldn't fully admit it either. Not like that. Not in the middle of the street, while his world was crumbling in real time. We were just talking. I said, weekly. That was the first time we met up. We weren't. It wasn't planned like that. Are you seriously doing this right now? Jake said, his voice cracking. I saw you. I saw the way you looked at him. He was right, and I hated it. You were supposed to be my best friend, he continued. And he was supposed to be out of my life. Gone. Not cuddled up with you at some coffee shop like nothing ever happened. We weren't cuddling. Oh, so now we're parsing definitions? Jake let out a bitter laugh. You know what? I'm not even mad at you for talking to him. I'm mad at you for hiding it, for pretending like you were still on my side while you were sneaking behind my back. That word, sneaking, hit me hard, because I knew he was right again. I didn't mean to hurt you. I said, my throat dry. I didn't know how to tell you. Bullsh asterisk T, Jake snapped. You didn't tell me because you didn't want to tell me, because you knew it would feel like betrayal. And guess what? It does. There was no way to fix it in that moment. No perfect sentence that would erase the fact that I had crossed a line. I could see it in his face, not just anger, but hurt. Deep, soul punch kind of hurt. He got in his car, slammed the door, and drove off. And just like that, the person who knew me best was gone. I stood there for a while, dazed, barely aware of Alex approaching me from behind. Evan, he said carefully, I'm sorry. I didn't know he was going to be here. Me neither, I said. It wasn't your fault. But even saying that felt complicated, because part of me, a dark, ashamed part, wondered if we both subconsciously want to be found out, like we hadn't wanted to live in limbo anymore. I didn't say that out loud. Instead, I just said, I need to go. I went home, shut all the blinds, and sat on my bed in the dark. My phone buzzed endlessly. Texts from mutual friends who'd heard from Jake, vague messages like, "You okay?" and "Dude, tell me you didn't." I didn't answer any of them. For the next few days, I moved through life like a ghost. Work felt meaningless. Food tasted like cardboard. I couldn't stop replaying Jake's voice in my head. You were supposed to be my best friend. Was I in love with Alex? Or was I just lonely? Was I drawn to him because he was broken the same way I felt broken? Or had something real bloomed between us in the shadows of guilt? The more I tried to make sense of it, the more tangled it got. And then Alex texted me. I don't want to make things harder for you, but I also don't want to disappear like I never mattered. He wasn't asking for anything, just not to be erased. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I went to Jake's apartment the next night. I knocked twice. No response. I waited. Then, finally, the door opened just a crack, and Jake stood there, arms folded, eyes hollow. "I don't think I can talk to you yet," he said flatly. "I'm not here to defend what happened," I said. I need you to know that I didn't plan for this. I didn't go looking for him. It just happened." Jake looked at me for a long time. Then he said something that cut deeper than I expected. "You sound just like him." That stung. He used to say the same thing, Jake added. "It just happened," as if that makes it okay. "I'm not him," I said, a little sharper than I meant to. "Maybe not, but now you're standing on the same side of the wreckage." He started to close the door, but I stopped it gently with my hand. "Can I ask you one thing?" I said quietly. "If you knew he and I had something real, even if it's complicated, would you ever be able to forgive me?" Jake didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Maybe, but not now. Not like this." And he closed the door. It wasn't the worst outcome, I guess. He didn't scream, didn't curse me out, but it still felt like a funeral. I walked back to my car, sat inside, and stared at the steering wheel. The city lights blurred in my peripheral vision, like a dream unraveling. I realized something in that moment that made my chest tighten. Even if Jake forgave me someday, things would never go back to the way they were. I'd broken something. Maybe it wasn't on purpose. Maybe it wasn't even avoidable, but it was broken all the same. Later that night, I texted Alex. "I need time, not because I don't care, but because I do." He replied almost instantly, "Take what you need. I'll be here." I didn't know what to do with that, with someone being patient with me when I wasn't even sure I deserved it. The days passed slowly after that. My phone stayed mostly silent. Jake stopped showing up in the group chat. Our mutual friends clearly didn't know what to do with the situation, and honestly, I didn't blame them. No one wants to choose sides in a breakup, let alone a post-breakup betrayal involving someone's best friend. One evening, a mutual friend, Chris, finally reached out in person. We met at a bar we used to go to as a group. Chris ordered a beer, looked at me over the rim of his glass, and said, "You really did it, huh?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "Jake's a mess," Chris said, "but he's not out for blood. He just feels like he lost two people in one hit." "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," I said. "No one ever does," Chris replied. "But here's the thing, man. If this thing with Alex is real, you have to figure out what you're willing to lose to have it." That stuck with me, because deep down, I knew that was a question I'd been avoiding. Was I willing to let go of the most important friendship I'd ever had for a shot at something new with someone who came into my life in the most complicated way possible? Or would I spend the rest of my life wondering what if? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew I had to find it. Fast. I didn't expect to hear from Jake again so soon. It was 2 weeks after that night outside his apartment. 2 weeks of silence, of avoiding our shared circles, of waking up every morning hoping that maybe this time I wouldn't feel like I'd swallowed something sharp. And then I got a message. Short, blunt, "Need to get my stuff from your place." That was it. No greeting. No passive-aggressive punctuation. Just a sentence that made my stomach turn. I stared at the text for a long time, then typed back, "Okay, when?" He replied almost instantly, "Tomorrow, 6. I almost said I'd leave a key under the mat. I almost said I wouldn't be there, that he could take whatever he needed, and I'd stay out of his way. But I knew what that would say about me, that I was still running, that I wasn't strong enough to face him. So instead, I just said, I'll be here. The next day, I cleaned the apartment like I was expecting my mom to visit, vacuumed, tidied the living room, fluffed the pillows on the couch, the one he'd cried on when Alex left him, the one he'd slept on after drinking too much the night we found out his dog had cancer. That couch held too many memories. All of them now felt tainted by guilt. At exactly 6:04, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there he was. Jake didn't look angry or sad. He looked tired, worn down, like someone who hadn't slept right in weeks and didn't care if anyone noticed. "Hey," I said softly. He just nodded, brushing past me. He walked straight to the hallway closet, his old gym bag still hanging there, then to the bathroom where he kept his extra toothbrush and shaving kit. He was efficient, methodical, like he'd rehearsed this. I stayed quiet. I figured if he wanted to talk, he would, but just as he finished zipping up his bag, he turned to me. "I kept thinking about whether you loved him while we were still together," he said suddenly. I froze. "Did you?" he asked again. "Even a little?" "No," I said immediately. And that part was true. I didn't feel anything for him back then. Nothing more than a distant respect. Jake stared at me for a moment, eyes narrowed like he was trying to spot a lie. "And now," he asked, "do you love him now?" I could have said no. Could have lied to spare him the final blow. But the truth had been burning my throat for too long. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think I understand what it is yet. But I do know it's real. Whatever it is, it's not some rebound thing." He laughed bitterly. "Must be nice, getting clarity from my wreckage. That's not fair, isn't it?" He dropped the bag by the door and turned fully to face me now. "I thought we were solid," he said. "You and me. I mean, hell, I used to tell people you were my ride or die. My brother. I would have taken a bullet for you. And I never stopped being that." I said, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have every right to be hurt. I cross a line, I know. But Jake, I didn't betray you to win something. It just happened. Slowly. Quietly. And I tried to fight it. I swear I did." Jake looked at me for a long time, then sat on the edge of the couch. Same spot he'd sat 1,000 times before, now feeling like neutral ground in a war we never meant to start. "You know what hurts the most?" he said. "It's not that you and he have something. It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me when it started. You knew I'd be gutted. So instead, you let me walk around like a fool while you and him had your little emotional affair in the background." I swallowed hard. I was scared. "I know," he said. "I was scared too. Every day I woke up next to him, wondering when he'd stop loving me. Turns out he already had." Neither of us spoke for a while. Then quietly he added, "I wish I hated you. That'd make this easier." I looked at him, really looked. The cracks in his armor, the way he kept blinking fast, like he didn't want to see the emotion pooling in his eyes. "I wish you hated me too," I whispered. Jake stood up and slung the bag over his shoulder. "I'm not ready to be friends again," he said. "I don't know if I ever will be. I understand. But for what it's worth," he added, glancing at the floor, "I hope it's worth it. Whatever this thing is with Alex. I hope you don't ruin each other the way he and I did." And with that, he left. This time, I didn't run after him. I didn't beg him to stay. I just stood there, numb, as the door clicked shut and the sound of his footsteps faded down the hall. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't text Alex either. I just sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, asking myself the same question over and over again. Is love still worth it if it costs you the person who knew you best? The next morning, I finally texted Alex again. "Can we meet? I need to talk. In person. No distractions." He replied right away. Name the place. I'll be there. We met at the park, not the usual coffee shop. Somewhere open, neutral. I didn't want this to feel like another hidden chapter. I wanted to be seen. I needed to. He was already sitting on a bench when I arrived, a coffee in one hand, the other buried deep in his jacket pocket. He looked nervous, but hopeful, like maybe, just maybe, this was a turning point. I sat down next to him and took a deep breath. I told Jake everything. I said. Alex's eyes widened. How did he take it? Like someone being cut open slowly. I said, but he listened. He walked away, but he listened. I'm sorry, Alex said. I never wanted to come between you two. I know. We sat there in silence for a minute, watching a little kid chase a pigeon near the fountain. Then I turned to him. Tell me honestly, I said, if Jake hadn't been my best friend, if there wasn't all this mess, do you think we would have found each other anyway? Alex didn't answer right away. Then he said, yeah, I do. Because even when I didn't want to let myself feel anything, I already did. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing that. Then let's not lie to ourselves anymore. I said, let's stop apologizing for feelings we didn't force. Let's stop hiding. Alex nodded slowly. Okay. But I added, I need time. I need to know I'm not just doing this to escape the guilt. I need to be sure. He reached over and gently placed his hand over mine. Then take all the time you need. I'll be here. And for the first time in weeks, I believed him. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Jake would ever speak to me again. I didn't know if Alex and I could build something real from the ashes of everything we'd broken. But I knew one thing. For the first time, I wasn't lying to anyone anymore, not even myself. I didn't expect healing to feel so heavy. After the conversation in the park, I walked home not with clarity, but with questions buzzing in my head like bees trapped in a jar. Alex said he'd wait. That sounded romantic in theory, but I wasn't sure how long I'd need, or if I'd ever be able to fully untangle what I felt from the guilt that still gripped me like a fist around my throat. I didn't text him that night. I didn't talk to anyone. I just lay in bed with my phone in my hand, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me, round and round, just like my thoughts. Jake's words echoed louder now that the noise had died down. I hope it's worth it. What if it wasn't? What if all I ended up with was a fractured friendship, a maybe relationship built on emotional debris, and a version of myself I could never look at in the mirror the same way again? The next morning, I found myself walking to the bookstore a few blocks from my apartment, not because I needed anything, but because it was the one place that always made me feel grounded. Rows of quiet, untouched stories, shelves of lives that weren't mine. I didn't expect to see him there. Alex, he was in the corner, sitting on a bench with a paperback in his lap, wearing headphones and mouthing the words as he read, a habit he'd once told me helped him concentrate. I paused in the aisle, watching him for a moment. The sunlight from the window hit the side of his face, and I noticed a tiny scar on his cheek I'd never really seen before. It wasn't a dramatic moment. He didn't see me. He didn't rush toward me. But something inside me shifted. I realized then that I wasn't falling in love with an idea, or with a version of him I had known through Jake's stories. I was falling for the real him, the guy who talked with his hands when he got excited, who still believed in writing thank you notes, who carried too many books in his bag and never finished half of them. I didn't approach him. Not that day. I just turned around and left before he could notice me. And for the first time, the tightness in my chest didn't feel like guilt. It felt like longing. That night, I started journaling. Not because I'm the Dear Diary type, but because I needed a place to put everything I didn't know how to say out loud. I wrote pages and pages. About Jake, about Alex, about myself, about the way things fell apart so quietly, and how I kept trying to convince myself it was all just bad timing, when maybe it was just inevitable. By the end of the week, I made a decision. I texted Alex. Let's go for a walk. Just us. Just air. No big talks. I just want to exist near you for a while. He replied, name the place. We met at the edge of the city's botanical garden. It was a cool afternoon, and the sky was overcast in a way that made everything feel softer, quieter, like the universe was turning down the volume just for us. We didn't talk much at first, just walked. Sometimes our hands would brush. He didn't reach for me. I didn't reach for him. It was restraint and maybe respect too. Eventually, I said, "Do you ever think we met the wrong time?" Alex was quiet for a long moment. "I used to," he finally said. "But now, I think the timing is what made this real. We didn't look for each other. We found each other when we had nothing to offer but honesty." I nodded, because I understood exactly what he meant. He continued, "It's weird, you know. Everyone talks about love like it's this magical, clean thing. But I think the real kind, it's messy. It shows up uninvited. It asks you to choose, and sometimes it makes you lose. And if you're lucky, it teaches you who you really are." I looked at him. "You're not scared of what we could become?" I asked. "I'm terrified," he said without hesitation. "But I'm more afraid pretending I don't care." It would have been so easy in that moment to lean in, to kiss him, to let the world blur and disappear like it does in movies. But real life isn't a movie, and something inside me knew we weren't there yet. "Not quite. I need a little more time," I said. He smiled, not sadly, but with a strange, quiet peace. "I told you," he said. "I'll be here." And just like that, we walked on. The next big surprise came the following weekend. I was at a mutual friend's birthday, one of those awkward situations where people keep the invite list vague because they don't want to take sides. I almost didn't go, but Chris talked me into it, saying, "You can't hide forever, man. Be awkward, but show up." So I did, and Jake was there. He saw me the second I walked in. I saw him too. We locked eyes across the living room crowded with balloons and a badly mixed Spotify playlist. I gave him a small nod. He didn't nod back, but he didn't walk out either. Throughout the night, we stayed on opposite sides of the room. I talked to people who weren't really listening. He drank with people who were probably saying all the wrong things. But around midnight, I stepped outside for air, and a moment later, he followed. I didn't look at him right away, just stared up at the sky. He broke the silence first. "You look like you haven't slept in a month." "Feels like it too." He took a slow breath. "Look, I still don't know how to feel about everything, but I've been thinking about me, about you, about Alex." I stayed quiet, let him speak. "I was so busy blaming you for what happened," he said, "that I didn't stop to ask whether I ever really saw him. Or you. Maybe I was so used to being the victim that I forgot I had blind spots too." I finally looked at him. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said. "I know," he replied. "And that's the worst part. Because if you had tried to hurt me, I could hate you. But you didn't. You just fell for someone who stopped loving me. And maybe it's not your fault. Maybe it's just life." A gust of wind passed between us, pulling our jackets closer to our bodies. Then he said, "I'm not ready to be close again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't want to hate you anymore either." That SH*T's exhausting. I felt something in my chest ease. Not disappear, but ease. "Thanks for saying that," I said. We stood there for a while, not talking, just existing. Not as friends, not as enemies. Just people who had been through something impossible together. When I got home later that night, I lay down and stared at the ceiling again. This time, though, I wasn't trapped in a loop. I was just quiet. And in that quiet, I felt the first real thread of peace in a long, long time. I didn't know what was going to happen with Alex. I didn't know if Jake and I would ever rebuild what we'd lost. But I knew this. Sometimes you don't move on by running. Sometimes you move on by standing still and letting the truth catch up. It had been a month since Jake, and I stood outside that party in the quiet. A month since he told me he didn't want to hate me anymore. It was a kind of moment that should have brought relief, and it did for a while. But closure has a strange way of echoing. It doesn't just land once and disappear. It hums in the background, reminding you that even forgiveness doesn't restore everything. And in that silence, I found myself at a strange crossroads. I wasn't waiting for Jake's approval anymore. And I wasn't carrying the same raw guilt that used to keep me up at night. But I also wasn't with Alex, not fully, not officially. We still talked, still texted, still shared moments, but there was a hesitation in both of us. Like we were standing on opposite edges of something that could change our lives, waiting to see who would jump first. One afternoon, he invited me to a small gallery opening. "It's just a local thing," he texted, "but the artist's work is all about emotional honesty. Thought it might be fitting." I stared at the message for longer than I should have, debating whether this was just another one of our in-between moments. But then I realized I didn't want to be in between anymore. I wanted to know where this was going. So I texted back, "I'll be there." The gallery was tucked away in a quiet street downtown, one of those places you only find if you're looking for something different. The kind of place that smelled like old wood floors and fresh paint. I arrived just before the event started, and when I walked in, I spotted Alex instantly. He was wearing a soft gray sweater that made his eyes stand out more than usual. He looked calm, but when he saw me, a subtle smile pulled at the corners of his mouth. Not wide, not overeager, just enough to make me feel like I was right where I was supposed to be. We didn't say much at first, just stood side by side, looking at the pieces on the walls. The art was simple but heavy, portraits of people in vulnerable moments, crying, laughing, sitting alone with coffee cups. Underneath each piece was a small handwritten caption from the subject. Things like, "I thought I'd never stop missing him. This is the first time I looked in the mirror and didn't want to look away. I still don't know what love feels like, but I think it's something like this." Each sentence hit harder than the last. When we reached the last piece, we just stood in silence for a minute. The caption read, "I forgave him, but I'll never be the same." I turned to Alex. "That one feels familiar." He glanced at it, then back at me. Forgiveness changes people, not always the way we expect. We sat down on a bench near the back wall of the gallery. People moved around us, but it felt like we were in a bubble. Finally, I spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what we are." His posture tensed slightly, just a flicker, but he didn't interrupt. I continued. About how we started, how this thing between us was born out of something broken. And I don't want that to define us forever. He nodded slowly. "Me neither." I took a breath. "So I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest, even if it hurts." "Okay," he said quietly. "Did you ever still love him, Jake, while we were talking?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Wow. That's a heavy one." "I know." He looked down, then back up, meeting my eyes fully. "I think part of me will always care about him. He was my first real love. You don't erase that. But was I still in love with him when you and I started connecting?" He shook his head. "No, that ended before I admitted it. I just didn't have the guts to say it out loud until everything fell apart. That hurt a little, but it also brought relief." "Okay," I said. He added, "I never wanted you to be a rebound, Evan. I want something real. But I also don't want you to feel like you're stuck in the middle of my unfinished business." "You're not the only one with unfinished business," I said. "I'm still grieving the friendship I had with Jake. But I think part of me needed to lose that in order to see what else was waiting." Alex looked down at our hands, not touching, not quite, just close enough to feel the gravity. "I don't want to wait anymore," I said, more to myself than to him. "I don't want to live like we're some footnote in someone else's story. We're here now, and I want to know what this could be." He reached over and finally, after weeks of distance and restraint, he took my hand. Not forcefully, not dramatically, just gently, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "So do I," he said. We stayed like that for a while, our fingers interlocked as the room around us slowly emptied. Later that night, we walked through the city in silence. No destination, just our footsteps echoing off quiet buildings. At one point, he paused at a crosswalk, turned to me and said, "I think I've been afraid that what we have only feels intense because it was born out of chaos. But being with you, it feels different from what I had before. It feels calm." I knew exactly what he meant. With Jake, love had always been loud, passionate, volatile, sometimes beautiful, sometimes cruel. But with Alex, Love felt like breathing. Not always simple, but never forced. We stopped at my apartment door. He didn't ask to come in. I didn't invite him. Not yet. I'm glad I saw you at that bookstore, I said softly. He smiled. You didn't say anything. I didn't have to. He leaned forward, and for the first time, without fear, without guilt, we kissed. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a movie scene. It was quiet. It was real. And when he finally walked away into the night, I didn't feel regret, or doubt, or panic. I felt like something had finally started, something honest. After that night, after our first real kiss, I expected things to change overnight. I thought I'd wake up and everything would be clear, easy, resolved. But the truth is, even when you finally step into something honest, your old shadows don't disappear. They follow you, quietly, at a distance. Alex and I didn't label what we had, not right away. There was still too much healing happening. For both of us, but the space between us had changed. We started texting first thing in the morning, not just late at night. We made plans in the daylight now, real, intentional time spent together. It wasn't secret anymore. And yet, there was always a layer of caution in the air, like we were still afraid someone might pull the rug out from under us. The hardest part? Navigating the silence from people around us. Jake and I still hadn't spoken since the night of party. Chris checked in from time to time, but he didn't bring up the situation unless I did. Our friend group had thinned. Not completely, just enough to feel the absence. Sometimes, I caught myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Ones where Jake and I were laughing with drinks in hand, our arms slung around each other's shoulders like we had the world figured out. It made my chest tighten. I didn't regret what I had with Alex, but losing someone like Jake, even in a slow, quiet way, still hurt. One Saturday, Alex and I planned a small road trip to a beach town a few hours away. Nothing elaborate, just a break from the city, from the weight of familiarity. It was the first time we'd be away together since everything had started. I was excited, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous too. As we loaded up the car, Alex glanced over at me and said, "You're overthinking again." I smirked. Always. Do you want to cancel? No, I said quickly. I want to do this. I just haven't done normal in a while. He reached for my hand before I could turn the key. Then let's redefine what normal means. The drive was peaceful. We took turns playing music, switching between soft indie, embarrassing 2000s pop, and the occasional sad ballad we both pretended not to connect with. The air felt lighter the farther we got from the city. And for a little while, it almost felt like the rest of the world didn't exist. We checked into a cozy rental near the coast, the kind with creaky floors and mismatched lamps, where the air smelled faintly of sea salt and old wood. That night, we walked along the shore, our bare feet sinking into the cool, wet sand. The moon was bright, and the waves rolled in with a gentle rhythm, like a lullaby for grown-ups who hadn't felt at peace in a long time. I don't think I've ever done this with someone, Alex said suddenly, gazing out at the water. What? The beach. I teased. He chuckled. No, I mean something that feels as simple. No pressure. No pretending. Just being with someone who doesn't need me to perform. I looked at him, the way his eyes softened in the moonlight, the way his body seemed more relaxed out here. You've had perform a lot, huh? He nodded. With Jake, it was like we both wanted to be perfect for each other, so much that we stopped being real. And I'm not blaming him. I did it too. I think we both lost ourselves trying to fit each other's expectations. And with me? I asked, half afraid of the answer. With you, he said. I'm scared. But I'm me, and that means more. We sat down in the sand, side by side, not quite touching. I let his words settle between us. I'd always known what we had was different, but hearing him say it aloud gave it shape. It made it feel more real. You know what's funny? I said, my voice low. I used to think love had to be dramatic, to mean something. Big fights, big passion, big heartbreak. But now, I think the quiet stuff matters more. Yeah, he whispered. The quiet stuff's where you find the truth. Later that night, as we lay in the rental's small bed, facing each other in the dark. He reached for my hand again and said, "I want this. Whatever we're building. I'm not afraid of it anymore." I looked at him. Me neither. It was the closest I'd felt to peace in months. But peace has a way of testing you. When we got back to the city 2 days later, I had a message waiting from Jake. "Hey, can we talk?" It was simple, unemotional, but it hit like a wave anyway. I stared at the screen, frozen. I hadn't expected it, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. Alex noticed my expression as he unpacked his bag. "Everything okay?" I turned the phone to show him. He read the message and looked at me. "You don't have to respond right now." "I know," I said, but even as I said it, I was already typing. "Yeah, let me know when." Jake replied, "Tomorrow night? Your place." My chest tightened. "He wants to meet tomorrow. At my place." Alex paused, then said carefully, "Do you want me there afterward? Or not?" I thought for a second. "Not right away. Let me feel it out. I don't know what it's going to be." He nodded. "Okay." The next day felt like slow motion. I cleaned the apartment again, more out of nerves and necessity. My stomach was in knots, and I must have checked the time a dozen times an hour. At 7:01 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jake standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes guarded but not cold. I stepped aside to let him in. He didn't sit, just stood near the window, staring out for a moment. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, "about everything." I nodded. "Same." "I don't want to drag this out," he said. "I came because I realized something." I waited. "I've been mad," he continued. "But more than that, I've been grieving. Not just Alex, but us. You and me. What we had. I know. And I keep asking myself, is it really betrayal if someone's heart changes without permission? Or is it just life not giving a damn about our plans?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He looked at me then. "I'm not ready to be your best friend again. Maybe I never will be. But I think if I hold on to this anger forever, it'll just rot me from the inside. And I've already lost too much to let that happen. So what does this mean?" I asked cautiously. "It means I'm letting go," he said. "You and him, it still hurts. But I get it now. And I don't want us to pretend to be okay. I just want us to be real. Whatever that looks like." I swallowed hard. "Thank you for coming. For saying that." He gave me a small, tired smile. "Just promise me something. Anything. If he ever hurts you, don't protect him. Don't make excuses. Just walk away. You're better than that." "I will," I said. "I promise." He nodded once. "Then I guess we're done here." He turned to go, but before he reached the door, he looked back and said, "And for what it's worth, I hope it's real. For both of you." When the door closed behind him, I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally standing on solid ground again. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my hands resting on my stomach, like I was waiting for something to come crashing down on me. Aaron's words echoed in my head on a loop. "I hope it's real. For both of you." But what did real even mean anymore? Because even after everything, after the heartbreak, the messy confessions, the silences that screamed louder than anything we could say, I still didn't know where I stood with Adrian, or if I even wanted to stand anywhere near him. The next morning was hazy. I got dressed like a robot, forcing myself to eat half a banana, but everything tasted like static. My phone buzzed 3 times. One from my mom, one from Darren, and one from an unknown number I didn't even bother opening. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Not yet. But by noon, my fingers were already hovering over Adrian's contact. My thumb brushed the call button more than once. And then I finally pressed it. It rang twice. And then, "Zay." His voice was quiet. Not hesitant, just gentle. "Hey," I said. And suddenly, all the things I practiced saying in my head overnight vanished. "I didn't think I'd hear from you today," he added. There was a rustling sound in the background. Maybe he was outside. After yesterday, I let out a breath. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Silence. Then, me too. We didn't say anything for a few seconds. It wasn't uncomfortable, though it felt like we were both sitting with our emotions in the same room, even if we weren't physically together. Can we meet? I finally asked, somewhere neutral. His pause was shorter than I expected. Yeah, I know just the place. The place Adrian chose was a small, tucked-away park behind the community library. We used to come here during high school, especially when we didn't want to be found. It was quiet, with a few benches and a line of trees that shielded most of the view from the road. When I got there, Adrian was already sitting on one of the benches, a coffee cup in his hands. He didn't see me at first. He was staring at the ground like he was trying to memorize the cracks in the pavement. I walked slowly toward him, unsure if I was more nervous or angry or both. When he finally looked up, there was something unreadable in his face, like he was prepared for me to either hug him or punch him. I didn't do either. I sat down beside him, not too close but not distant either. He offered me the coffee in his hand. I got your favorite. I wasn't sure if he'd want one, but I took it without a word. Took a sip. It was still warm. Finally, I turned to him. Aaron told me something yesterday. Adrian didn't flinch, but I saw the shift in his shoulders, a subtle tension, like he knew what was coming. I continued. He said, there were things you kept from me, about how things ended between you two, about why you pulled away from me. His jaw tightened. I stared at him. So I'm asking now. No more half-truths. No more vague looks and half-apologies. I want to know everything. Adrian. All of it. He looked away, his eyes scanning the trees like they might offer him an escape. But then, slowly, he nodded. I didn't want to drag you into the mess, he said quietly. I thought I was protecting you. By lying to me? I never lied, he said, finally meeting my eyes. I just chose silence over hurting you. That's still a choice, I replied. He nodded again. You're right. There was a long pause. And then he began. It wasn't just that things weren't working with Aaron. It was how I felt about you while I was still with him, Adrian said, each word feeling heavier than the last. I didn't cheat. Not physically, but emotionally. I think I left that relationship a long time before I said it out loud. I clenched my hands around the coffee cup. Back then, you were always there, always this anchor I didn't realize I was leaning on. And the more I leaned, the more I realized I was feeling things I shouldn't, not while I was with someone else. Then why didn't you just leave him sooner? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Why pretend for months? Because I was scared, he admitted, raw and honest. Not of breaking up with Aaron. That was inevitable. I was scared of ruining us. You and me. I stared at him. But you ruined it anyway. I know. A bird flew overhead, its wings cutting through the silence between us. Adrian looked down. And when I finally ended things with him, I thought I could fix it. That I could come to you, be honest, and we'd somehow figure out. But I waited too long. And then Aaron came to you first. I swallowed hard. Yeah, he did. Adrian's voice cracked. I messed everything up. There was a part of me, a loud, bitter part, that wanted to stay angry, that wanted to hold on to betrayal and the silence and the way he made me feel like I was never enough to deserve the truth. But there was also another part, a quieter one, the part that remembered the way he used to look at me when I wasn't paying attention, the part that knew he wasn't just sorry, he was broken by it, too. I finally said, I wish you would have trusted me sooner. So do I. We sat in silence again, both of us unsure where to go from here. The moment stretched out, not uncomfortable, just fragile. He finally spoke. Do you think there's still something left to rebuild? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the breeze on my skin, the sun warming my face. Then I said, maybe, but only if we're building on truth this time. Adrian looked at me, his eyes shining, not with tears, but with something like hope. I can do that, he said. I want to. And this time, I believe him. For the next few days, Things between us shifted, not in some dramatic movie scene way. No passionate reunions in the rain or late-night confessions over candlelight. It was slower, more careful, like two people walking across a frozen lake, testing every step before putting their full weight down. Adrian started texting again, not every second, not overbearing, just enough. Good morning here. A check-in after my shifts. A photo of his lunch with a dumb caption. It wasn't about big gestures. It was about presence. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to guess what he was thinking. It was strange to go from silence and avoidance to this strange, quiet honesty. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And maybe that's what Aaron meant. Still, not everything was settled. Because no matter how things felt between us now, we still hadn't addressed the biggest piece of all this. The fact that I was still walking around with a heart that had been shattered once already. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to hand it back to the person who dropped it. One afternoon, I sat in my room, scrolling through my camera roll, and I found a photo I didn't remember taking. It was Adrian, lying on my couch, half asleep, sunlight slanting across his face. His hand was curled loosely over his chest like he was dreaming of something soft. I stared at it for a long time, and then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I invited him over. When Adrian arrived that evening, he stood awkwardly in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he should hug me or shake my hand. So I just stepped aside and let him in. He noticed the candles I'd lit, the food I'd barely tried to cook, spaghetti with garlic bread I'd almost burned. He smiled, a little surprised. "You cooked?" he asked, amused. "Barely," I replied. "Don't get used to it." He laughed, and I hated how good that sound still felt. Dinner was easy. Conversation flowed. We didn't talk about heavy things, just old memories, work drama, dumb jokes from high school that still made us laugh even though they probably shouldn't. And then we were sitting on the couch, the same couch where so much had happened, where we used to fall asleep watching movies, where he used to rest his head on my shoulder like it meant nothing when it meant everything to me. I turned toward him. "Adrian, can I ask you something? Get the real answer?" His posture changed immediately, not defensive, just alert. "Always. Why did you start dating Aaron in the first place?" He blinked. "Wow, that came out of nowhere." "I know," I said, "but I've always wondered. I mean, we were so close back then. You used to say I was the only person who really knew you." Adrian looked down at his hands, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "I think part of me wanted to prove something," he said slowly, "that I could have a real relationship, that I wasn't just some confused guy who didn't know what he wanted. And Aaron was a safe option?" Adrian looked up. "Yeah, safe, stable. He checked all the right boxes. On paper, he was everything I should have wanted." I nodded slowly. "But it wasn't real." He shook his head. "Not like what I felt with you." There was again that gut punch honesty I wasn't used to from him. And maybe that's what made it believable. "I used to hate you," I said suddenly. "After everything. I hated you for pretending we were just friends, for looking at me like I meant more, and then pretending like I didn't." "I know," he whispered, "and I deserved it." I swallowed hard. "The thing is, I don't want to hate you anymore, but I don't know how to stop holding it against you either. I don't want you to pretend like it didn't happen," Adrian said. "I just want the chance to show you who I am now, not who I was when I was too much of a coward to admit what I felt." We sat in that quiet for a long time, and then, slowly, he reached out, not for my hand, not for a kiss, just for the space between us. "Can I stay tonight?" he asked. "Just to sleep? No expectations. Just to be close." I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, really looked, at the vulnerability in his eyes, at the apology that didn't need words. And then I nodded. "Okay." That night, we lay side by side in my bed, fully clothed, not touching. The silence was thick, but not heavy, just full. At some point, I turned on my side and looked at him. He was already looking at me. "I used to imagine this," he said quietly. "What?" "Being next to you, not as your friend, as someone who could just stay." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just whispered, then stay. He did. We didn't kiss. We didn't say anything else. But somehow, the stillness of that moment said more than either of us could have. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something or trying to prove I was worth choosing. I just felt chosen. The next morning, I woke up before him. It was still early, just a pale, blue-gray light coming through the blinds. The kind of soft morning that makes you forget, just for a moment, that life can be messy and complicated and painful. Adrian was lying next to me, facing the ceiling, one arm draped over his chest like he'd been guarding something even in sleep. I watched him for a moment, not in a romantic way, but in that quiet, cautious way you look at someone when you're still trying to believe they're really there. He stirred a little, eyes fluttering open. "Hey," he whispered, voice rough with sleep. "Hey," I replied. There was a pause. Then he smiled, a small one, but real. "I didn't dream." "For once," he said. "That's a good sign, right?" I nodded. "Better than mine." He raised an eyebrow. "What was yours?" I hesitated. I was back at that party. The one where Aaron pulled me aside and told me everything. Only this time, when I turned to look for you, you weren't even there. Adrian looked down. "I'm sorry. I really am." I sat up, pulling the blanket with me. "I know, and I believe you. That's not the hard part anymore." He looked confused. "Then what is—" "The part where I let myself believe we could actually work." He sat up too, brushing his hair back. "Zay, I don't expect you to forget what happened. I just want the chance to do it differently now. Better." I turned to face him. "Do you really think we can go back?" "No," he said simply. "But maybe we don't have to go back. Maybe we start from here." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But something still clung to the edges of my chest, a tightness I couldn't ignore. What if I get hurt again? I asked, what if you get scared again, or pull away again, or find someone else who seems safer? His eyes darkened, but not with anger, with something deeper. "Then you hold me accountable," he said. "You call me out. You walk away if I ever make you feel like a second choice again. But you have to give me the chance to prove that I won't." It was the kind of thing that could sound like a rehearsed line in any other context. But the way he said it, low, raw, like it was costing him something, it landed differently. Still, I didn't respond. Because it wasn't something I could decide right then, in that one morning, after one shared bed and one unspoken hope. So I told him the truth. "I don't know yet, but I'm not slamming the door shut." He exhaled, like even that was more than he expected. "Then I'll take it, and I'll wait." Over the next few weeks, we didn't define anything. There were no labels, no Facebook announcements, no awkward "what we now?" Conversations. But he came over more. Sometimes we'd cook. Sometimes we'd just sit on opposite ends of the couch, doing our own thing, but somehow feeling connected anyway. He didn't try to rush it, and I didn't try to overanalyze it. We let it breathe, and honestly, for the first time, I was okay with not knowing exactly where it was going, because it felt like we were actually building something this time, not out of desperation, not out of loneliness, but choice. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text one afternoon that froze my chest. "Aaron, hey, I think we should talk. In person." I stared at it for at least 5 minutes before showing it to Adrian. He looked at it, then back at me. "You gonna go?" "I think I have to." He nodded. "Okay." I expected him to say more, to ask me not to, maybe even to look worried. But he didn't. "I trust you," he said simply. We met at the same coffee shop, where everything first cracked open. Aaron was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, nursing a cup that had long gone cold. He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, like someone who'd been replaying a loop too many times in his head. When he saw me, he stood awkwardly, like he wasn't sure if he should hug me or not. I sat down before he made a decision. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I figured you wouldn't have asked unless it was important." He nodded, then looked down. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About everything." I stayed quiet. "I want to apologize," he said. "Not for what Adrian did. That's not my place anymore. But for putting you in the middle of it. for using you as some kind of moral scoreboard. That's not how I saw it. I said honestly, you were hurt. You just needed someone to witness it. Aaron's eyes lifted to mine, surprised. I've been trying to hate you, he said quietly. You and him. But I can't. And I think that's how I know I'm finally letting it go. There was a strange peace in the air. Not a resolution, exactly, but something close. I'm glad you said that. I replied, because I don't hate you either. We sat there for a moment longer. Then he smiled faintly. So, are you and Adrian? I cut in gently, still figuring it out. He nodded. That sounds about right. When I left, I didn't feel lighter. Not exactly. But I didn't feel pulled in half anymore, either. And sometimes that's enough. That night, I came home to Adrian sitting on the floor of my room, surrounded by takeout boxes and 2 spoons stuck awkwardly into a tub of half-melted ice cream. He looked up. You didn't text, so I figured I'd bring comfort food just in case it went badly. I smiled and kicked off my shoes. It didn't. Good, he said, standing up, because I got dumplings, and I don't share those with just anyone. We sat on the floor, laughing over bad chopstick technique and melted cookie dough. And somewhere in the middle of that ridiculous quiet moment, I looked over at him, really looked, and felt that ache in my chest finally soften. Maybe we weren't perfect. Maybe we never would be. But for once, the question wasn't, can I really move on? It was, do I even want to, if this is what I'd be leaving behind? It's strange how healing doesn't arrive with a dramatic gesture or a sudden shift. Sometimes it just sneaks up on you. One moment, you're picking up broken pieces you're not even sure belong to you anymore, and the next, you're standing there holding something whole. Not perfect, but real. Weeks passed, and Adrian, and I didn't fall into some glossy version of love. We didn't become the kind of couple that posts curated moments on Instagram or finishes each other's sentences. We just tried, and every day we kept choosing to try. Some days were harder than others. Like the morning he woke up with a nightmare and couldn't even explain what it was about, only that it left him shaking. I didn't press. I just held him until the tremors eased. Or the day I ran into one of our old high school friends who asked, without even thinking, "Wait, weren't you and Aaron close? Isn't this kind of messy?" I had to walk away before I snapped. When I told Adrian about it later, he didn't get defensive. He just nodded and said, "I'm sorry you have to carry that. I know what that weight feels like." And in that moment, I didn't feel judged. I felt seen. That was new. One night, we were sitting on my rooftop. The city lights blinked around us, distant and quiet. Adrian had his back against the wall, knees pulled up, and I was lying flat, staring at the stars like they might answer something I hadn't figured out yet. Do you ever think about the versions of us that didn't happen? I asked. He glanced at me. Like what? Like, what if you told me how you felt before you ever dated Aaron? What if we just skipped all the detours and drama? He thought about it for a second. Then he said, I think that version would have fallen apart. I turned my head toward him, surprised. I wasn't ready, he said. And you might have been ready, but you were too good at pretending you weren't. We would have destroyed each other. I laughed a little. That's kind of depressing. He smiled. It's honest. I had to lose you to understand what you meant, and you had to hate me to learn how to protect your heart. I nodded. So you think we needed the mess? I think we needed the truth. And sometimes the truth looks like a mess until you step back and see the shape of it. We sat in silence for a while after that. A soft, still silence. The kind that only exists between two people who've seen each other at their worst and didn't walk away. And then he reached for my hand. He didn't ask. He didn't try to kiss me. He just laced his fingers with mine, like he'd always known the space they belonged in. I looked down at our hands, then up at him. There wasn't a question in his eyes. But this time, I had the answer. I'm not scared anymore, I said. He squeezed my hand gently. Me neither. I won't lie and say we lived happily ever after. There were still tough conversations. Still moments when the past crept in and whispered doubts into my ear. Still days I had to ask, is this really the right choice? But more often than not, The answer was yes. Not because we were perfect, but because we were willing. Willing to learn each other all over again. Willing to rebuild, not from nostalgia, but from now. From this version of us. Older, bruised, maybe even a little jaded, but honest. One afternoon, while we were sitting in my kitchen eating leftover pasta and drinking cold coffee, Adrian looked at me and said, "You know, if someone told me a year ago that I lose everything I thought I wanted just to find what I really needed," I finished it for him. "You wouldn't have believed them." He grinned. "Exactly." And I smiled back, because I understood now. Love doesn't always arrive when you're ready. It doesn't follow a clean path or respect the timing you imagined. Sometimes it breaks everything first. Sometimes it comes dressed as a mistake. But if you're lucky, if you're patient, it comes back as something better. Not perfect, just real.